In a land where bargains were struck faster than trust could be earned, a red-haired woman carried 3 hens and a hidden resolve into the heart of an unfamiliar ranch. Souls of the Old West brings you the untold tale of Clementine and Sterling, a story of grit, honesty, and a love built not on promises, but on work, courage, and feathers. If you're ready to saddle up for a journey where every glance matters and every choice has a price, you're in the right place. Before we continue with this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video, because when you stop doing this, YouTube understands that you don't like this content and stops recommending good stories like this. Oh, and don't forget to comment below where you're watching us from. We love to know that. Sterling didn't speak right away after slicing the seal from the envelope. He let the folded paper rest in his palm for a breath longer than needed, gaze steady, as if the letter might dissolve under too much attention. Then he read silently, his expression betraying little, until Gideon cleared his throat with that kind of polite impatience that always sounded like warning. "Well?" Gideon asked, leaning against the edge of the workbench, arms crossed, as if the news was his to handle too. "It's her," Sterling answered plainly, folding the letter back in half and pressing it flat along the edge of the table. "Clementine Shaw. Confirmed through the agency. She's agreed to come." Gideon raised both eyebrows. "So you finally did it," he muttered. "Hired yourself a wife." But Sterling ignored the jab, too caught in the strange churn behind his ribs. "I didn't hire anything," he said slowly. "I agreed to a match that came with a name I recognized." He remembered the girl then, the one from the trading post years back, auburn-haired and sharper than the blade her father tried to sell as kitchen safe. She had spoken like her words cost her something. She had stopped a boy from kicking a dog with nothing more than a glance and a sentence that stuck to Sterling's mind like dried mud. "He bleeds the same as you." That wasn't something you forgot, not when it came from someone with eyes that didn't flinch. "The Shaws aren't known for their hospitality," Gideon commented as Sterling smoothed the paper and turned it toward the ledger. "Folks say the youngest is temperamental. Hair like a lit match, mouth like a hammer." Sterling paused, recalling more of the girl than Gideon could guess. "A temper is only dangerous when it's built on lies," he said. "I remember her speaking plain when everyone else looked away." He didn't bother explaining the context, because Gideon wouldn't care, and Sterling didn't owe it to him. Instead, he dictated, "Clear the north room. Replace the mirror. Clara needs to wash the linens and mend the lace trim on the curtains. No perfume." "No perfume?" Gideon echoed. "She allergic to soap or something?" Sterling looked up dry. "No. But this isn't a show. She's not coming here to be dazzled, and I'm not setting traps. I want her to walk in and see exactly what her days will look like." Gideon jotted the instructions, but couldn't help the next quip. "Sure hope she likes chickens and men who forget to shave." Sterling cracked half a smile. "If she doesn't, she'll speak her mind." He tapped the envelope, weighing something silent. "That's what I'm counting on." She had learned long ago that facts rarely arrived when summoned. They had to be caught on the fly, like loose chickens or good trade. Her father's voice floated through, low but commanding, more baritone than usual. The agency confirmed. The rancher accepted the arrangement. No objections. "She'll go at the week's end." That was her then, discussed like inventory. Her sisters chimed in feigned sighs of envy and amusement. Clementine's always been the odd one. "Let's see if a stranger can fix what Papa never could. Or maybe he'll send her back with a ribbon and a receipt." They laughed, and Clementine, face still and heartbeat steady, decided not to barge in. There would be no righteousness in protest, no victory in confronting cowards behind curtains. Not yet. Instead, she took a half step back and whispered, "Let them enjoy the sound of their own cowardice." In her mind, she was already out of the house, already packed, loaded, gone. Not exiled. Prepared. She'd go on her own terms. She'd find use, or make it. She didn't need her father's approval to live. She only needed silence long enough to plan. At supper, her father didn't meet her eyes, though he made a show of passing her the gravy and asking if she wanted another helping, since travel takes strength. She nodded once and said nothing. That was the only power she had left in this house. Quietness when they expected chatter, civility where they assumed rebellion. Her sisters whispered and watched her with smirks as if expecting her to break into tears or drama. But Clementine simply cleaned her plate and excused herself before the pie came out. "Got things to prepare," she said plainly, which was true in more ways than one. No one followed her. No one offered help. That suited her just fine. She stepped back into the kitchen, rolled up her sleeves, and untied the apron from behind the door. Then she reached beneath the sideboard for the crate she'd been saving since last spring. Reinforced slats, clean straw, iron latches. A home for what she'd take. She didn't want to arrive with nothing. She wasn't going as a bride with a trunk full of lace and perfume. She was going as a woman who could feed herself, trade for what she lacked, start something with the same hands she used to gut a fish or grind wheat. She would bring chickens. The hens were roosting, but Clementine knew how to handle birds without raising a fuss. She entered the small shed behind the kitchen and crouched with purpose. She reached for the smallest first, not in size but in nerves. "You'll be Mig," she said, lifting the hen with care, keeping the wings folded and calm. Mig clucked once and settled into the crate as if recognizing she was being included in something that mattered. Next was the speckled one, lean and quick-footed, impossible to corner unless tempted with food. "Tilly," Clementine said, using a sliver of cornbread to bait the catch. Tilly pecked it straight from her hand before Clementine scooped her up. "Always rushing," she murmured. "That'll get you eaten if you're not careful." The third hen was already watching her, wide-eyed and standoffish from the corner. Clementine didn't rush. She held her gaze and waited, hand extended, palm up. When the bird finally approached, it did so with slow, suspicious dignity. Clementine smiled. "Bruma," she whispered, "for the clouds you carry behind your feathers." One by one, the birds were secured, tucked with extra straw, a water dish, and some crushed grain. This wasn't a farewell. This was a declaration. If her family wanted to cast her off, they'd see soon enough. She could land on her own feet. Later that night, long after the house had gone still and her sister's giggles had faded behind bedroom doors, Clementine sat beside the crate and ran her fingers along its edges, testing for gaps or snags. She'd double-knotted the rope handles, lined the corners with scraps of cotton to soften jostles, and carved small breathing holes just beneath the top slats. She whispered their names again, Mig, Tilly, Bruma, like talismans. These weren't pets. They were plans. They'd give her eggs, give her purpose. They'd let her knock on a neighbor's door with something to trade besides small talk. They would be her excuse to learn the shape of the land without looking like she was lost. As she checked the feed pouch one last time, she said aloud, not to the birds, not to the room, but to the part of herself that was already halfway to that unknown ranch. "I won't show up needing. I'll show up ready." It wasn't rebellion. It wasn't escape. It was decision, cut clean from the spine of the life she had known. She tied off the top of the crate and slid it under the table, then stood with squared shoulders and hair falling like flame down her back. The birds rustled, then stilled. She was packed. Clementine stood at the bottom of the porch steps, back straight, chin lifted just enough to be proud but not so much as to be mistaken for arrogant. Her trunk had already been lashed onto the back of the wagon, and the chicken crate was nestled beside it, with Mig, Tilly, and Bruma shifting inside with faint rustles of feather and claw. She had hoped, foolishly, she admitted, to receive something more than a nod from her father, but instead he remained inside, speaking through the doorway like he was ordering barrels of flour. "Remember what was arranged," he said, not stepping onto the porch, not offering his hand. "You are representing the family. Hold your tongue when tempted. Work hard, look pleasant, let the man lead." Her eldest sister gave a mockingly sweet smile, one hand fluttering as if waving goodbye to a passing carriage. "Send word if you strike gold or ruin." Either one would be entertaining. The middle sister didn't speak at all, only folded her arms and leaned against the doorframe, like someone watching livestock get loaded for auction. Clementine said nothing in return. There was no point. The moment had passed before it ever began. Coldness that deep had no interest in thawing. She simply turned toward the driver, adjusted her grip on the hem of her skirt, and climbed up onto the bench beside him without asking for help. The man tipped his hat, silent and respectful, which was more courtesy than she'd received inside. The road out of the Shaw homestead was packed dirt, and the wheels clattered against each stone with a kind of finality that suited her mood. She didn't look back, not once, and the driver didn't offer conversation until they reached the bend beyond the cedar trees. "You Shaw's youngest?" he asked, not unkindly, as he adjusted the reins in his hands. "Clementine," she confirmed. "The others weren't built for wagons." "And you are?" he asked, glancing sideways. She met his eyes without hesitation. "I'm built for whatever gets me where I'm going." That earned a soft grunt of approval. The chicken crate shifted slightly as they hit a rut, and she leaned back to steady it with one foot. "You brought hens?" the driver asked, genuinely surprised. "3 layers, she said. "Best I've got. They'll earn their keep." He chuckled. "Never saw a woman bring a dowry with feathers." She didn't laugh. "I'm not a gift. I'm an agreement. The birds are mine. If things don't go well, they'll still be mine." That quieted him for a while, and she appreciated it. She wasn't in the mood to explain herself to men who thought marriage was a prize fight or a pasture fence. These hens weren't sentimental. They were currency. Eggs meant food, trade, leverage. Every woman needed a little leverage. As the cart rolled on, the driver eventually relaxed and took to talking again, more out of boredom than expectation. "They say the man you're headed to, Sterling, right? They say he's steady. Not much of a talker. Keeps to his fences. Doesn't drink. Lost 2 cows last year and replaced them before winter hit." Clementine listened, letting the facts fall like nails into a box. "Is that what people want now?" she asked. "A man who doesn't drink and replaces cattle?" The driver grinned. "It's more than most do." She nodded once. "Then maybe that's enough." The truth was, she remembered him, Sterling. Not much more than a glimpse in a dusty trading post. But he had eyes that didn't slide away when a girl spoke her mind. She doubted he remembered her. That was fine. She wasn't the same girl. That version of Clementine had worn hand-me-downs and spoken like she didn't care if her words landed crooked. This Clementine had learned the sharp edge of silence. The only weight she carried now was her own. No father, no sisters, no softness behind her. Only the crate of hens, the satchel at her feet, and the taste of something like relief in her mouth. Bitter, but real. She reached into the satchel and pulled out a piece of muslin, folded twice, wrapped around 2 hard-boiled eggs she'd tucked away before dawn. She offered one to the driver, who looked at it with something like shock. "You feed your escorts?" he asked. "I feed whoever drives straight and doesn't ask for favors." He accepted the egg without further comment. She peeled hers slowly, letting the shell fall into her lap, careful to keep the yolk from crumbling. It wasn't a feast, but it was something she had earned, and that meant more than taste. As she ate, she reached back and checked the crate again, murmuring the hens' names under her breath. Mig was calm, as usual. Tilly restless. Bruma silent but alert. "These birds," she said to the driver without looking at him, "aren't just for eggs. They'll get me through a stranger's gate with something to offer besides words. People will talk to you if you bring them something that feeds them." He raised an eyebrow. "You planning to start a business?" She shook her head. "I'm planning to survive. That starts with being useful." He nodded slowly. "That's more sense than most bring with them to marriage." She didn't respond. She didn't need to. The cart rolled forward, and she tucked the muslin back into her satchel with the calm of someone who knew exactly what she had and why it mattered. As the morning stretched on, the driver pointed out landmarks, places he assumed she'd care about. "That creek floods in spring. This ridge burns in July if it's dry. That grove of poplars, that's where the preacher holds Sunday words if he's in town." Clementine gave polite nods but stored little. Geography mattered less than dynamics. She asked better questions. "Where do the women buy their salt? Who trades in flour? Which house holds the widow who sews?" He grinned. "You do your own shopping?" "I plan to do more than shop," she said, and pointed to a split fence rail on the horizon. "Is that the edge of his land?" He looked, then nodded. "Far side of it anyway. You've still got miles to go." She didn't sigh or fidget. She settled in deeper, checked the crate again, and unwrapped a small journal from the satchel. Names of things, prices. questions to ask. She wrote a single line: introduce yourself with what they can use. Then they'll listen when it matters. She didn't know yet what kind of man Sterling was, but she knew what kind of woman she intended to be. Not gentle, not soft, not decorative, functional, reliable, present. By the time the shadows began to change and the cart veered off the main road toward a narrower track, Clementine leaned forward and asked the driver to stop for just a moment. He looked confused, but reined the horses in without question. She climbed down carefully, dusted off her skirt, and crouched beside the chicken crate. "Ladies," she murmured, "we're close, so let's agree on something." She tapped the side gently. "No fuss, no feathers flying, and no dying. You give me eggs, I'll give you safety. We've got a deal." Bruma gave a soft, throaty cluck, and Clementine took that as assent. She climbed back onto the wagon, her spine as straight as ever, her jaw set. "All right," she told the driver. "Let's finish it." As the horses moved again, the crate nestled against her hip, warm and alive. She didn't have lace, didn't have a mother's blessing or a ribbon in her hair. What she had were 3 hens, a sharp mind, and a plan. And that would have to be enough. Clementine didn't wait for the wagon to come to a complete stop before standing and steadying the crate of hens with one hand. The ranch ahead of her was simple and functional, just like she expected. She scanned the structures briefly. The fencing looked solid, the porch boards didn't sag, and someone had bothered to sweep the steps. As she climbed down, the driver motioned to help, but she waved him off. Her boots hit the ground with certainty, not hesitation. The door to the house opened then, and out stepped a man with shoulders broad enough to match the stories. Sterling paused when he saw her, then walked forward, eyes not on her face, but on the crate she carried like a second spine. "That yours?" he asked. His voice was even, low, not gruff, not trying to impress. Clementine set the crate down gently before straightening to meet his gaze. "All 3, Mig, Tilly, and Bruma. Layers. They come with me or not at all." Sterling crouched beside the crate, peered in through the slats, then looked up at her. "Seems you brought more purpose than most." She didn't smile, but she did nod. "I'm not here to be decoration." "Good," he said, standing again. "I don't polish what I can't use." Together they carried it toward the house. The hens shifted with the motion, but didn't complain. Clementine had packed them tight enough to keep them from flapping and loose enough to breathe. As they reached the porch, she noticed a small pale feather drift out through the slats and land across the threshold. Sterling paused to glance down at it but didn't say anything. Instead, he shifted the weight in his hands and pushed the screen door open with his foot. "Step over," he said. "Let's not crush beginnings before they root." Clementine hesitated, then stepped across. She didn't know what he meant exactly, but she liked that he had. Inside, the room was plain but clean, with a table set for 2 and a faint smell of yeast hanging in the air. A loaf of bread, still warm, rested on a wooden board beside a knife, and a jar of soft butter sat waiting like someone had anticipated exactly this kind of arrival. "You bake?" she asked, eyebrows raised. "Clara, the neighbor, does," he said. "She drops things off when she wants her fence fixed or company avoided. I leave her be. It works." Clementine nodded once. That kind of honesty was currency to her. He placed the crate gently in the corner of the kitchen, near enough to the back door that the hens could get fresh air once released. "You want to let them out now?" he asked. Clementine shook her head. "They've had a rough ride, let them settle." Sterling looked at her like he'd expected that answer, or maybe just respected it. He motioned to the table. "Bread, if you're hungry. No ceremony here." "Good," she replied, pulling out the chair opposite his. "Ceremony wastes good butter." He actually cracked a grin at that, brief but real. She sliced the bread cleanly, spread butter with a measured hand, and waited to see what kind of silence this man would offer. Some silences were heavy with judgment, others light with ease. His was neither, his was listening. "You remember me?" she asked after a few bites. "Trading post. I was smaller, dirtier." He nodded. "I remember you stopped a boy from kicking a dog. I remember you didn't look away." For a moment, that hovered between them like something almost important, but not quite said. Then Sterling reached for his own slice and replied, "Didn't seem like it had helped the dog any." Clementine didn't argue. She liked that answer more than 1,000 noble speeches. They talked between bites, not out of politeness, but out of shared interest in avoiding vagueness. Sterling told her about the fences, how many still needed work before the next freeze. Clementine asked about water access, whether the well held all year or if it needed reinforcement. She spoke plainly, didn't soften her tone to make questions seem ladylike, and he didn't recoil or grow defensive. "There's a pump behind the barn," he said. "Strong enough for stock and kitchen. I patch it every other season. You'll hear it squeak when it gets lazy." "And the hen house?" she asked. "Decent," he said, "but I built it for 6, not 9. You'll want to double the perch and lay another row of stone to keep weasels out." "Weasels?" she repeated, raising an eyebrow. "They'll take more than eggs if they're hungry," he warned. "But if your birds are half as clever as you act, they'll hold their own." That almost made her smile. Almost. She didn't smile often, but something about the way he treated her answers, as worth building from, not dismissing, chipped away at her armor, feather by feather. She filed away every detail he gave her, not because she doubted him, but because knowledge was the only real way to earn a place. Words faded. Work lasted. When the bread was half gone and the light had shifted across the floorboards, Clementine leaned back slightly and asked the question she had saved for last. "Why me?" she asked. "You could have asked for someone else. Softer, prettier, more obedient." Sterling didn't flinch. "I didn't ask for someone softer," he said. "I asked for someone who wouldn't lie to me, someone I could build with, someone who wouldn't break when the work got ugly." Clementine watched him closely, noting the steadiness in his gaze. "And that's what you think I am?" "That's what I hope you are," he said plainly. "I'll find out one way or another." There was no menace in his voice, no threat, just certainty. And for some reason, that steadiness settled something in her. Not comfort, but readiness. She stood then, took their plates to the basin and rinsed them with the efficiency of someone who knew a home wasn't a place. It was what you maintained. Sterling didn't stop her. When she dried her hands, she looked down and noticed the feather again, still resting by the door. Still uncrushed. Still whole. "Leave it," he said behind her. "Let it be the first thing that didn't get swept away." She nodded once and let it stay. Clementine didn't wait for an invitation when Sterling gestured toward the rear gate after breakfast. "You said you'd brought layers," he remarked, glancing toward the side of the house. "I figure you'll want to see where they'll stay." She stood up immediately, brushing the crumbs from her hands, and followed. He kept his pace even, but she noticed the way he glanced at her when he thought she wasn't looking. Curious, not cautious. When they reached the coop, Clementine walked ahead of him and examined it without a word. She squatted near the wire, inspected the base, traced the corner posts with her hand. "Ground's too soft here," she said flatly. "You'll want to pack it again or the rain'll sink your corner beam." Sterling tilted his head. "It's held so far." "So far's only useful if you're planning to lose birds tomorrow." She shot back, still crouched. "You laid your stone 3 inches shallow. Weasels can dig through that in a night." He didn't argue, didn't bristle. He leaned down beside her and asked, "What would you do different?" "Raise the perimeter," she said. "Line the bottom with broken brick or bottle glass. Curve the mesh out instead of down. Make 'em bleed before they breach." He gave a low whistle. "You always talk like that?" "Only when the birds are worth it." "Your latch is good, though. Clean design." He nodded once. "That part I knew." She moved on to the nesting boxes and stuck her hand into one of the straw beds. "You've got mites," she said bluntly. "Feel the grit? They'll strip feathers and make the hens pull their own out. Needs vinegar, cedar chips, and a dust bath." "I'll gather what you need," he replied without hesitation. Clementine turned to face him, one eyebrow raised. "You don't strike me as a man who takes orders." "I don't take them," he agreed. "But I follow good advice when it's right." For a moment they stood there, eyes locked, something unspoken settling between them. Clementine broke it first, brushing her hands clean. "I'll reline the boxes myself. I don't like wasting daylight." "You like doing things alone?" he asked. "I've had a lot of practice," she said. He nodded again. "Well, you've got rope and nails in the shed. You want help? You just say it." There was no weight behind the offer, no pressure, just the quiet certainty of a man used to working beside others without needing to prove anything. They walked the fence line next, not because Sterling suggested it, but because Clementine insisted. "It's one thing to coop a bird," she said, "another to keep out what doesn't belong." She pointed at the seam where the fence met the chicken yard gate. "This was repaired in a hurry. A stray bull tore through last spring," Sterling explained. "We patched it fast to keep the goats in." "Goats'll test weakness twice as fast as foxes," she muttered. "You double-wrapped the wire but didn't reinforce the post. If you get one bad wind, it'll fall in," he finished, nodding. "Noted." Clementine pulled a small pocket knife from her skirt and dug at the base of the post until the first layer of soil fell away. She turned the blade, revealing termite tunnels. "This post's half hollow. You want it to last the winter, soak the base in linseed and replant it. Or better, cut fresh cedar and replace the damn thing." Sterling crouched beside her, watching her work. "You don't guess," he said. "You just know." "I don't always know," she replied. "But I don't bluff. I'd rather be wrong with my hands dirty than right and too proud to act." That got a smile out of him. Quick, sharp. "I like that," he said. "Good. I don't say it for your liking," she answered. But she didn't mind hearing it. They moved in silence for a few minutes, checking the rest of the fencing. Then Sterling broke it with something unexpected. "Did they treat you like this back home? Like you weren't supposed to speak up?" Clementine didn't flinch. "They treated me like I was supposed to soften everything before I said it. Like telling the truth was a form of violence." Sterling nodded slowly. "Same as holding back being polite." "Exactly." She looked up at him, suddenly more exposed than she liked. "I don't do the smoothing anymore. I tried. It just made people more comfortable with ignoring me." "And now?" he asked. "Now I say things how they are. If someone breaks, that's on them, not me." Sterling let that settle between them before replying. "Well, you won't get shushed here." Clementine narrowed her eyes slightly. "What will I get?" "Room," he said. "Tools. Someone who hears you the first time." That was the kind of promise that couldn't be spoken lightly, and she didn't dismiss it. Instead, she turned back toward the coop and asked, "You keep a ledger?" "In the barn." "Why?" "Because if I'm going to fix all this," she said, pointing to the fence, "I want it logged proper. My work's not invisible anymore." He nodded. "Deal." Clementine paused near the water trough, dipping a cloth in and wiping her hands, then offered it to Sterling. He took it without hesitation. That kind of ease, passing tools, trading space, was rare. "You always been alone out here?" she asked. "Mostly," he said. "I've got help, but nothing that stays. This house has been quiet a long time." "Too quiet to think?" she asked. "Or just quiet enough?" He considered. "Used to be too quiet. Now it's adjusting." "To me?" "To more than one set of footprints," he said. "To someone who sees what I miss." That wasn't flattery, it was fact. Clementine stood straighter. "Then keep noticing. I don't plan to vanish just because I'm quiet." "You're not quiet," he said. "You're precise." She studied his face, not quite smiling, but something in her eyes shifted. "That's the best compliment I've gotten since I left home. You'll get more of them if you keep fixing fences like that." She laughed, short, low, but genuine. "Well, don't get soft on me now." "Not a chance," he replied, wiping his hands. The space between them was no longer filled with doubt. It was filled with choice. As they reached the corner of the coop, Clementine stopped beside the fence, her fingers resting lightly on the top rail. Sterling turned to face her, close enough now to see the sun catching in the threads of her hair, igniting them into deep reds and brighter copper. He didn't reach for her. Not at first. He simply waited, his expression unchanging, his hands at his sides. She tilted her head slightly. "Something else need fixing?" she asked. "Maybe," he said. "Something between here." He tapped the rail. "And here." He gestured toward the space between them. Clementine didn't retreat. "You sure that's wise?" "No," he said. "But I'm sure it's honest." Then she stepped forward. Not much, just enough, and he met her there. The kiss was brief, but not hesitant. Warm without overstepping, firm without possession. When they stepped back, neither of them spoke right away. There was no need. Clementine looked back at the fence, then at him. Still want me to replace that post? Absolutely, he said. But you might have just reinforced something more important. Don't get sentimental, she warned. Not planning on it, he replied, but his smile lingered longer than before. It was the low, desperate clamor of the hens that pulled Clementine from bed, not any thunder or howling wind. She was upright before her feet touched the floor, already reaching for the coat by the door. Her instinct didn't hesitate. The sound was familiar, panic in sharp, ragged bursts. It wasn't the noise of a fight, but the edge of one. Stay put, she whispered to herself as she crossed the room, barefoot, fumbling for the lantern with one hand while tying the coat shut with the other. She was down the steps in seconds, crossing the yard with measured urgency, eyes locked on the coupe. The door was swaying, slightly ajar, and from the far side she saw it, fast and low to the ground, just a flicker of movement before the body dipped back into shadow. "Fox," she hissed, not a guess, a knowing. She grabbed the first thing she could, a broken barrel lid from beside the shed, and approached the coupe from the rear, slow, but not sneaking. She wasn't trying to catch the thing. She was trying to give it reason to leave. The fox bolted from behind the nesting box the moment she rounded the far side, but Clementine didn't flinch. She hurled the lid like a wheel, watched it skid into the path of the beast, and only then called out loud, "Go on, you bastard." Not tonight. Lantern in hand, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, boots unlaced, he stopped mid-step when he saw Clementine standing like a sentry in front of the coupe. One hen had burst free and was flapping madly in the yard, Tilly, of course, and the others inside were still a frantic mess. Clementine had already dropped to one knee, cooing and reaching carefully through the coupe's side to calm them. "You get a look at it?" Sterling asked, approaching. "Fox," she replied without turning. "Young, but not dumb. Door must have worked loose in the wind. You caught it. I caught its attention, that's all I needed." She glanced up now, face lit from below by Sterling's lantern. "You should check the gate. If it can get into the yard, it can come back." He didn't ask what she'd been thinking, didn't comment on her bare feet or the blood at her knuckle, likely from a nail inside the coupe. Instead, he knelt beside her and held the light steady. "You handled it," he said. "If you hadn't, you'd be pulling feathers out of the grass right now." "I've lost birds before," she murmured. "I don't lose them twice the same way." He took the words as a lesson, not a boast. Tilly had finally settled, perched awkwardly atop the water bucket, and Clementine coaxed her back into the crate with a firm but gentle hand. "You keep a hammer somewhere close?" she asked, not waiting for him to answer. "I'm not going to sleep with a swinging latch on that coupe." "Shed," Sterling replied. "Back wall, nails in a tin by the shelf." Clementine rose, retrieved what she needed, and returned just as fast, all business. Sterling held the door steady while she hammered the second latch in place, reinforcing the corner and fitting a wedge under the hinge to tighten the frame. "You always carry storm plans in your head?" he asked after a few minutes of watching her work. "Not plans," she answered. "Just answers. You see enough problems, you learn which ones wait and which ones don't. You ever been scared?" The question surprised her. She stopped mid-swing and looked at him. "Not of foxes," she said honestly. "Not of broken doors. I'm scared of being somewhere I don't matter. Of building a life out of apologies and things unsaid. That kind of fear sticks." He didn't offer comfort. He offered understanding, which was rarer. "You don't need to be scared of that here," he said simply. "Not with me." Bruma had tucked herself back into the nesting box and made a low, grumbling sound that meant she was over it. Clementine folded her arms, more to still her thoughts than to warm herself. "I meant to fix that door earlier today," she said. "But there was always something else." "It held as long as it could," Sterling said. "It didn't fail. It just met something more determined." She looked at him then, really looked, and saw something deeper in his expression than concern for livestock. "You mean that about more than the door?" He didn't flinch. "I do." She nodded once, slowly. "Then we should name it." "Name what?" "Whatever this is," she said. "I don't believe in letting things sit unnamed. That's how they rot, or slip through cracks." Sterling tilted his head. "And what name would you give it?" She swallowed, not because she was nervous, but because saying it out loud made it real. "Beginning," Not a promise, not yet, but a place to start from. He stepped closer. I'll take that. You better, she said. It's the only offer I've got. And she meant it. Sterling didn't try to kiss her this time. He didn't need to. The closeness between them was already filled with something too sharp and honest for sweetness. We could make it official, he said. Soon. No preacher in town this week, but next Sunday one's due. You think this, she gestured between them, is enough to build on? I think trust is, he said. And I trust you to stand your ground when a fox comes knocking. She exhaled, a sound closer to a laugh than a sigh. That's your standard for a wife? No, he said. That's my standard for someone I build with. I don't need a wife, I need a partner. Clementine nodded slowly. That's what I need too. Someone who doesn't flinch. Someone who won't wait to be told what matters. Then it's settled, he said. Next Sunday. I'll be ready, she said. With or without a preacher, I don't plan on backing down. They shook hands then, not as a joke, not mockery, a real agreement. Fingers tight, eyes level. As they walked back to the house side by side, the coupe behind them stood quiet again, whole again, and not just because of a new latch. By the time they reached the porch, the lantern light was fading. Clementine stepped inside first and paused, then turned around. You said something earlier, she reminded him, that I wouldn't need to be scared of being ignored. That true? Sterling nodded. I see you, Clementine. I don't plan to stop. She gave him a long look and then said, Then we don't need to wait. Not for town. Not for papers. You want to do it now? He asked. She shook her head. I want to do it properly, but I want it known. I'm here. I'm staying. You don't have to wonder. He reached forward, took her hand again, not like before. This time he held it longer. Then we begin, he said. Name or no name, storm or not, we begin. And with that, Clementine turned, the coupe behind her secure, the house ahead of her warm, and a new weightless certainty resting between her shoulder blades. She had held the line, saved what mattered, and in doing so, named the first thing in her life she could call her own. Sterling stood at the edge of the yard with the preacher, arms crossed behind his back, watching Clementine knot the final tie on her borrowed veil. Clara had lent it without fuss, just set the linen down on the table the night before and said, I wore it when I chose someone worth keeping. Hope it brings you the same luck. Clementine had accepted it with a nod and no sentiment. Now, with the cloth pinned and settled low across her brow, she approached the center of the yard, where Sterling waited beneath the one tree they both agreed offered decent shade. The preacher, a traveling man with more kindness than polish, cleared his throat and said, Well, I reckon this is it. There were no benches, no bouquets. The only witnesses were the chickens, Mig, Tilly, Bruma, pecking distractedly at the dirt around their feet like three feathery girls too impatient to stand still. You ready? Sterling asked, his voice quiet but solid. Clementine gave a single nod. I'm not here by accident. The preacher smiled at that. Then let's skip the theatrics. He opened a worn book but read nothing from it. Do you, Sterling? Take this woman who brought her own hens, her own hammer, and her own mind? I do, Sterling said, not breaking eye contact. The preacher turned to her. And you, Clementine, do you take this man who built the fence you criticized, stood beside you in the coupe, and offered you a name only if you wanted it? She didn't rush. I do, she said, and I'll keep doing it. If we're building something, it better be with both hands. Good enough for me, the preacher said, clapping his hands once. By the power of common sense and consent, I call it done. No rings, no kiss called for. Just a handshake between them that shifted into something gentler, fingers threading together like twine pulled tight and meant to hold. Sterling leaned close, not to claim her, but to speak just for her. You sure? He asked again, barely a whisper. You still have time to run. I've done all my running, Clementine replied. Now I'd rather stay still and work. She looked down at their joined hands. If the roof leaks, we fix it. If the hens stop laying, we figure it out. But if either of us lies, we name it, he said. Fast. Loud. Exactly. That was the vow, not forever, not love, but truth as immediate and binding as a nail driven clean. Afterward, Clara insisted on bringing over fresh cornbread, even though she swore she hated weddings. "I like hers," she said, handing Clementine a pan still wrapped in cloth. "She's the kind that won't flinch when it's time to pull splinters." Sterling thanked her, but it was Clementine who took the gift and said, "Come by next week. I'll have something to trade." Clara chuckled. "You'll be the first wife on this road to offer barter before gossip." "That's the plan," Clementine replied. Most of the afternoon passed in quiet usefulness. Sterling repaired a loose hinge on the gate while Clementine relocated the hen's feed to keep it dry. They spoke, but not often. What needed saying had already been said. The three hens continued their role as disinterested bridesmaids, wandering between garden rows and fanning dust with lazy wings. When Sterling stepped away to check the fence line, Clementine lingered near the coop, watching Bruma scratch a perfect circle and nestle into it. "Smart girl," she muttered. "You don't wait for anyone to give you a place." She crouched down, ran a hand across the fresh straw, and nodded to herself. Everything here had been earned, nothing handed over. That's what made it real. Later, Sterling joined her on the porch. He brought 2 tin cups filled with weak cider and sat beside her, shoulders barely brushing. "Doesn't feel like a wedding," he said. "Feels like a Sunday with chores." "That's what I hoped for," Clementine replied. "If it had dresses and music, I'd be waiting for someone to take it all away." "I can't promise much," Sterling said. "But I won't take anything from you that you didn't give me on purpose." She nodded, sipped once, then passed the cup back to him. "This is ours now. Whatever we build, it starts here, with the dry patch on the roof and the toothy rake, and the chickens who don't listen." He looked toward the coop. "They're good company. They're honest," she said. "They don't pretend to be fine when they're not. Wish more people were like that." "Me too." They sat there long enough for the sun to shift. Nothing dramatic, no grand kiss, just the kind of stillness that lets roots take hold. Clementine reached for his hand, again without fuss. He took it like it belonged there, and neither said another word for a while. They didn't need to. As evening neared, Clementine returned to the coop one last time, basket in hand. It wasn't ritual. It was habit. She did it because it made sense. Check the birds, check the feed, check the corners. But as she opened the box, her breath caught. Not in surprise, but in quiet satisfaction. One perfect brown egg sat nestled against Bruma's side, still warm. "Well," she murmured, "guess you're the first to sing in this house." She cradled the egg in the basket, covered it gently with straw, and walked back toward the porch where Sterling waited. "We got something," she said simply, handing him the basket. He peeked inside and smiled, wide and genuine. "That's a start." "It's more than that," Clementine replied. "It's proof." He looked at her. "Of what?" "That when we build with care, something answers back." She turned to face the yard, the coop, the tree under which they'd married, and nodded to herself. "Tomorrow we fix the corner of the shed." "We do," he agreed. And with that, their first day as partners ended not in celebration, but in agreement. A nameless, wordless confirmation of what they both understood. This was the beginning, and it would hold. If Clementine and Sterling's journey moved you, don't ride off just yet. Hit that like button, subscribe to Souls of the Old West, and let us know in the comments what part of their story stuck with you most. Got a friend who'd love a good tale of grit, love, and chickens? Share this with them. Every story deserves to be passed along. See you on the next trail.